helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, Canadian certified counselor and award-winning psychotherapist.
Neurogenesis. Unless you have a degree in Latin, you may be asking yourself, what is this? Let me tell you, no, it is not another book of the Bible that you missed on your Read the Bible in 1 year plan. Rather, it's an exciting ability that we all have within us, and that up until recently, science thought was impossible. If you want to learn more about this amazing ability and how you can maximize its potential in your life, I encourage you to join us today as we explore neurogenesis, the renewing of your mind. If you're joining us for the first time, let me welcome you. My name is Melissa Waggett, and I am the co-host of the Life Transformation Radio Show. If you want to find out more about this program or listen to our past shows, I encourage you to go to our website at elamcounselingministry.com. Elam is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com, or you can call us toll-free at 1-877-544-3546. Again, that number is 1-877-544-3546. If you're joining us again, I have not forgotten about you, and I want to say hello to you as well. And thank you so much for your faithful listening. I also want to invite you to join me in welcoming our co-host of this show, Michael Hart. I will not be doing this alone today, thank the Lord. Michael will be exploring this topic with me. Michael is an award-winning psychotherapist, and he's also the director of Elam Counseling Services. And as always, Michael, I am so thankful I am not flying solo. And this topic is, I think, well, for me, was an eye-opening discussion we had in preparation for the show, because it is such an exciting area of science that, as I said, up until recently, was literally thought to be impossible. But there's some life-changing things that we can glean from this emerging topic today. So thank you, Michael, for joining me. And thank you for letting me pick your brain.
And thank you very much for this, that wonderful introduction, Melissa. And I'm very excited about doing this topic on neurogenesis, because when I read the research and the study that I did in preparing for this show and just learning more about the topic of neurogenesis, the information that I came across was really fascinating. And one of the things that I am discovering, that when the Bible tells us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that's not an exaggeration. Scientists are still just begin to touch the tip of the iceberg in learning about how wonderfully our bodies are made. And in this new area of neurogenesis, they're finding out that the adult brain is now capable of regenerating new brain cells or new neurons, which is fascinating because the implications of that are very far-reaching.
And so, as I said, if you were a Latin geek, that you knew what we were talking about, where that neurogenesis, it's that creation of new neurons.
Right.
And it's only recently that science has actually said this can happen, because prior to that, there was this thought process that neurons or nerve cells, once you lose it, it's gone.
Yes, absolutely.
You're born with the amount you have.
Yes.
And you die with the amount you have and probably a few less.
Right. And so if you had any damage to your hippocampus, or that region of the brain in which the new brain cells are created, then tough luck for you. You are permanently at a loss. You have suffered a loss that is going to last for the rest of your lifetime. And if your body, they thought that if you were not producing these neurons, if for some reason your body is not producing these neurons from a child, then you were doomed to a life where you'll be suffering things like loss of memory, the inability to memorize things, a depressed mood, and spatial difficulties, which are all abilities that are affected by the neurons in the hippocampus.
And so today we are going to, hopefully in layman's terms, unpack this scientific discovery, and also go into a lot about, as I said off the top, how we as individuals, knowing we have this ability to generate new neurons in our brain, how can we maximize that potential?
Yes.
And hopefully stop some of the effects that this decrease in neurons can give us long term. But before we get into that, Michael, I'm wondering for people who may be joining us for the first time and are hearing us talk about Elam Counseling Ministry and Elam Counseling Services, and they're saying, I've never heard about this before. Who are you guys? What is this all about? Do you mind taking a moment just to share what is Elam Counseling Services, who we are, why we're here, what we do?
Yes, we are a non-profit organization, and we provide professional Christian counseling from a Christian perspective. So our services are covered by most insurance companies. And because we're a non-profit organization, we try to offer our services to those who might not be in the financial position to afford it. And so donations are a very important need for us as a not-for-profit organization. So if you have benefited from this show, if you have benefited from the services that we provide, please consider making a donation to keep us on the air and to keep us doing the work that we do for the body of Christ.
And so if you want to get into touch with us to make that donation or to access some of our counseling services, we encourage you to go to our website at elamcounselingministry.com. Elam is spelled E-L-A-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com, or call us toll free at 1-877-544-3546, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So Michael, why the topic of neurogenesis today? We're not starting some big biology lesson by any means. So people who may have shied away from science growing up, we're not going to overwhelm you with sciencey terms. But why did you bring this topic today? Why is it so important?
Well, I think when I read the research and what is being discovered now by scientists, I am reminded of Romans 12:2, where Paul beseech us or encourage us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And I think when it comes to neurogenesis, it's a literal process by which the mind is being renewed. Scientists are now discovering that by the time you're 50 years old, you have replaced all the brain cells that you were born with, because the mind is continuously being renewed. God created us for our minds to be automatically renewed.
And there's a specific area they've identified where this renewal is happening that they've been able to pinpoint, and it's that hippocampus area that if we have people who've listened to us over the years, we've said the word hippocampus on this show at least once before.
Yes.
But for those of people whose memories may be failing a little bit, myself included, do you mind giving us a reminder, what is the important role of the hippocampus in our brain?
Yes, I think I touched on it briefly before, but in a nutshell, the hippocampus is that region of our brain that deals with things like memory. It's that area of our brain that gives us the ability to develop memory, both short-term and long-term memory. And so in Alzheimer patients, for example, who are beginning to lose their memory, they have a difficulty. They have seen that there is damage in that area of the brain. But one of the reasons why I decided to do this show is that scientists are now also seeing that there is a link between the hippocampus and neurogenesis, the production of new brain cells, and the depression. So what the research that they have done, they've said that if they block the generation of new brain cells in the studies that they do, that there will be increase in depression, and that things like antidepressant increases the production. They have done studies where they're able to look at the growth of new neurons in that part of the brain, and what they're saying is that antidepressant, for example, increase the production of neurons in that area, and that when they stop the antidepressant, they notice that there is a decrease, for patients who they have studied. So what they're saying is that if we can find a way to increase the production of neurons, we can actually control the mood of persons as well. And even more importantly, what they're discovering is that some of the treatment that we do in our hospitals, that doctors do in hospitals for cancer, for example, that blocks the growth of cancer cell, also restrict and prevent the growth of new neurons. So they have this problem that has developed where a lot of cancer patients, after they have been cured of their cancer, they are now severely depressed. And until recently, doctors couldn't understand why these cancer patients would be so depressed after their treatment, whereas before, when they were just diagnosed with cancer, they were not depressed. And so they are now cured and they are depressed, and they can't seem to figure out why. But they are now discovering that the reason these cancer patients are depressed is because the treatment has blocked the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus. And so I think this is a warning for many of us who sometimes spiritualize depression and make believers feel that if you're not happy and if you don't have the joy of the Lord, then you're somehow willfully sinning or you're not trusting in God. What these studies are showing is that sometimes it can be a structural problem with the brain, where your brain has been affected by whatever means, and it's just not producing the neurons in the hippocampus as God created it to. So just like a broken leg, you can have a defective hippocampus region of the brain that is not producing new neurons, and as a result, you are depressed.
And so has there been any research to say or to look at what increases neuron growth and what decreases neuron growth? Because for me, what I'm hearing is I want to grow my neurons and I want to prevent my neurons from not growing. Yes. So how do I go about doing that? Are there practical things that they've been able to identify that I can do right now?
Yes, and so I find that it's very interesting because what the studies are bearing out is also what the Bible tells us. And if we look at the story of Elijah, for example, in 1 Kings chapter 19, around that section of in the book of Kings, we find that when Elijah was in this state of depression and God came to him in his depression, God did some very practical things to help him overcome his depression. And one of the things that God did was to give Elijah food to eat. And what the scientists are now finding through this study is that the production of new neurons in this area of the brain can be affected by what we eat. And they're saying that some type of foods have a very positive effect on the hippocampus and causes us to increase the production of neurons. So I would imagine that if we were to sort of guess what type of food Elijah had to eat, scientists is sort of filling us in on some of the things that are good. So we can just let us imagine here for a moment. Scientists are now saying that crunchy food is very good for the production of neurons as opposed to soft, textured food. They're saying that things like blueberry is very effective in helping the brain to produce new neurons. And they're also saying that foods that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, such as salmon, are very good for us. So we can just begin to stretch our imagination and just say that maybe Elijah had a diet there of rich in omega-3 fatty acid and maybe some blueberries.
Yes, very tasty. But what was God not giving him to protect his brain? What would be a less than ideal meal for him to eat?
If we think about that passage, we could say for sure God did not give him food that was high in saturated fat.
That's too bad, because when you said crunchy foods, I was like, yes, chips are crunchy. They're for my brain cells, but the chips, even the crunch is not going to outweigh that saturated
not that kind
fat.
of crunch, like
not
maybe
that kind of crunch.
leafy vegetables or carrots,
Got
nuts,
it.
and
Okay,
so forth.
I was
Yes.
hoping for the chip addicts out there. I was hoping for you, because I am
So
in life
definitely
company.
not chips, definitely not food that is high in saturated fat. Another thing that they're finding that affects the production of new neurons and therefore our chances of being depressed is alcohol, intake of alcohol. And so if you are battling depression and you're also using alcohol, you're actually exacerbating your condition, because the studies are showing that when they study the brain on the effect of alcohol inhibit the production of new neurons, and this decrease in the production of neurons is linked to higher incidence of depression.
And I think that's super interesting, because so often when people are experiencing depression, sometimes you end up self-medicating with things like drugs and alcohol.
Right.
And so that thing you're using to make yourself feel better
Right.
is not going to bear out in the long term. Your
Yes,
depression's only
yes.
going to make itself work. So it's like a double whammy.
Yes, and so let us just be careful here as we talk about alcohol, that what they have also found is that not all types of wine, for example, or all types of alcohol has this effect. But what they find is that red wine, for example, doesn't inhibit the growth of new neurons. Red wine, they find, is actually not in moderation, is actually good for the production of new neurons. So no wonder the Bible talks about drinking a little wine. So again, the moderation is the key. A little red wine, what they're showing from the research, can be good for the production of neurogenesis.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Show. Today we're talking about neurogenesis, the renewing of your mind. If you've missed the first half of today's show, we encourage you to go to our website at elamcounselingministry.com. Elam is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com, or call us at 1-877-544-3546, and we'd be happy to give you a copy of today's show. So, Michael, we've talked about food and different types of beverages that can help us or harm us from a neurogenesis perspective.
Yes.
Are there other activities that can help promote new brain cell development in my hippocampus?
Interestingly, again, the Bible talks about fasting. And what they're finding is that intermittent fasting is actually a very good thing for the production of neurogenesis, because there's something about not eating for a while that when you start eating again, it seems to speed up the process of neurogenesis. So the studies say that intermittent fasting is a very good way to promote the production of neurogenesis. And for those of you who are just joining the show, we're talking about how neurogenesis, which is the production of new brain cells in the hippocampus, how that can affect depression, and the better your neurogenesis, the less depressed you will be. So people who are listening who are depressed or have sad moods, this show is giving you very important tips as some things that you can begin to do, some natural things I would say that you can do to begin to improve your condition. As I said, the Bible tells us we're fearfully and wonderfully made. The body has this tremendous capacity to heal itself through the food that we take and how we live. And so this show is giving us some tips that can help.
And so one of the things I'm wondering about, Michael, that we've talked about in the past, and I'm wondering if research has been able to make the correlation here, is the discussion around exercise. Because I know in the past you've given us lots of tips in past shows where you say physical activity is really important. It gives you those feel-good hormones. But has there been any studies that have been able to bear out if it actually creates new neurons in these areas?
Yes, and let me say that this show that we're doing today, when you're talking about neurogenesis and the effect that it has, I would like to give credit for a lot of the research that was done by Dr. Sandrine Thuret, and she's a neural stem cell researcher at King's College in London. And so what we are talking about here is based on some of the literature that I have read that refers to her work as someone who's studying neural stem cell research, who's doing neural stem cell research. And so one of the things that she talks about in her work is the benefit of exercise to help, that exercise helps when we have activities in our life where we're active. It triggers something in the body and in the mind that increases the production of new neurons in the brain and increases our memory, but also helps with our mood. And so if you're depressed, activity is a very good way, increasing your activity. And what I'm finding is that many people, they are reluctant to take medication, but at the same time, they're not doing any of the natural things that could help their body to fight the depression. So if you're battling depression, exercise, activity, becoming active is a very good way of helping with that. One of the things that have always baffled me is in 1 Kings chapter 19, when Elijah was depressed and God came to Elijah, and after he had given him food, and we have talked about the impact of food on depression, he also told Elijah to get up and to start walking. He gave him instruction to go to a particular place, which would involve walking at least, I think it's 5 miles a day that he would have to walk to get to his journey. And it baffled me because I'm thinking, here is this man who is depressed, and here is a God who, when Elijah was healthy, the Bible tells us that he would often literally transport him from one point to another. Like they would be looking for Elijah and they couldn't find him because, I'm going to use local terminology, he would be in Orleans by the time the king hears that Elijah is in Orleans, and they would try to get him in Orleans. He would literally take Elijah and place him instantaneously in another city. And I'm saying, why didn't God just take Elijah up and move him somewhere instead of telling him to walk? But what scientists are now telling us is that exercise and activity is good. So God in his wisdom knew that by telling him to walk, it was actually triggering his body, the chemicals in his body, the endorphins that would cause him to start overcoming his severely depressed mood.
What an interesting observation. As you were describing that story, I had a huge smile on my face because we've said this so many times on the show. Part of why we love making the links between our faith and the science is because they mesh so well. And when we do look at this research that's being done today on exercise, you see the literal new neurons that have been developed. And it's so cool to think that, as you say, God in his wisdom was literally promoting that neural development in Elijah as he walked, when, as you say, he could have just beamed him up, shot him somewhere else, but he wouldn't have benefited from those structural changes.
Right, yes.
But the God who designed your brain knew what he was doing.
Yes.
Knew what he was doing. Mm-hmm. How cool is that?
Absolutely.
What other ways can we compare?
Well, here we come to a controversial one.
Oh gosh. Oh geez. Okay, you
and I know a lot of men are going to be happy to hear this one, everyone. And they're going to be going, "Yes, I told you, I knew
Michael,
this was good for you."
What is it?
So what the research is now showing too is that sex is also good for the production of new brain cells in the hippocampus for neurogenesis. And so what the studies that they have done, they say that they can see an increase in the new neurons. So if a person is depressed, sexual activity can actually be a good way of increasing the production of those neurons. But let me say here that on this Christian broadcast, we're not talking about sex outside of marriage. We're talking about sex within the context of a loving relationship. Because if you have sex outside of marriage, just for the sake of saying, okay, I'm going to my body's going to produce new neurons, and you're going to deal with guilt, and it's going to make you even more depressed.
We are walking a line today, Michael.
And so we're not encouraging anyone to do anything that's going to make them more depressed. We're saying that the research has said that sex is a very
I'm
good
glad
way
you made
of,
that clarification.
of producing these neurons. And that shouldn't be surprising, because we have known that during loving sexual activity that the body reduces calming hormones, endorphins, and feel-good hormones that is very good for the body. And so it should be no surprise that it's good for the brain as well.
Okay, so one question I have, if people go overboard on your last suggestion as to how we can promote neural growth, and they're not getting any sleep anymore.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Right.
Or does have that, I got to do the balance thing here. Right. You're not sleeping now because I'm promoting neural growth.
Absolutely. So absolutely not. So I think we have to have that balance in life, because another thing that they say is good for the production of new brain cells and hence good for reducing depression is sleep. And so if you're sleeping well, then it increases this production of these neurons. So sleep is also good. So we have to do that balance, Melissa, between sleep and intimacy and eating as well. Right? It's about having a balanced life and not overdoing it in any way. And one of the things that they talk about too that is also good is learning. They said that learning is also very good for stimulating the brain and for creating new brain cells. And I think one of the reason for the high rate of Alzheimer in our society and other mental illnesses where the brain starts shutting down is that a lot of people, because of this prosperous society that we live in, they retire at 50 and they stop learning. They stop stimulating the brain. And as a result of that, the production of new neurons is affected. And so they start developing. So it's very important to keep your mind active. And what better way? There's no better way to keep your mind active and learning than studying the Word of God, which also has very positive teachings that can help you to feel better about life, to be more hopeful about life, and to feel better about yourself. So on that note, I see that we have quickly come to the end of today's show. So I want to thank you very much for listening to this show. And I'd like to say a special thank you for Bishop Williams and Pastor Paulette Williams of the Emmanuel Apostolic Church of God for hosting a mental health conference that I spoke at a couple of weeks ago. And I was very touched by the enthusiasm, I would say, the number of people that turned out, but also the enthusiasm of the people that was there. So a special thank you for the leadership that they have taken in promoting mental health.
And I'm so glad you said that, Michael, because if people are interested in hearing more topics or wanting to reach out to you, again, you can always call us at 1-877-544-3546, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Or you can go to our website at elamcounselingministry.com. Elam is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. And please remember that if you have benefited from this show, if you want to keep us on the air and you believe in this service, then please consider giving a donation to us by the means contained on our website. So until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elam Counseling Services.
And Melissa Waggett.
Praying together that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.